Hello, welcome to the Chessboxing podcast. This week we've got a special guest on the podcast. We've got David Bitton, who is the director and maker of a film called I always get this wrong way around, but By Rook or Left Hook. Is that right, David?
That's correct, yeah.
So thanks for coming on the podcast, David. First question is, how many puns can you fit into a film title?
Well, By Rook, Left Hook, two.
It's impressive. I mean, it's a great start, really. Where did you get the idea? Is that like a phrase you've heard elsewhere, or?
I've seen it. I've actually seen it around. Yeah, I think there were some articles that used like the similar turn of phrase, but it was like by Rook, or I forget what they were. By Rook or Hook or something similar, you know. But I thought By Rook or Left Hook is a bit more, you know, has a bit more of a lyrical
Rhythm to
quality.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
I'll have to pass that on to our commentators. They love a pun. There's very few chessboxing puns they haven't come out with. I'm not sure they've said that one yet. So we'll try. Tell you what, we'll try and crowbar that into our live stream in December for you.
Is that Matt Lunn and Chris Levy?
That's right. Yeah, Matt Lunn and Chris Levy.
Very entertaining commentary anytime they're on air.
Yeah, very funny guys. Very good chemistry between them. We're very lucky to have them, to be honest. So when was the film released, David?
So it's going to be, well, as of today, we're recording this. I'm not sure when it's going to air, but the film is going to be released on December 7th. So it'll be available on iTunes and Google Play, and perhaps a couple of other platforms. So I'll be letting people know through the channels. But yeah, it's going to be December 7th. It's going to finally be released after 11 years of working on it.
Wow, so you've been working on this for 11 years. So when was the first show that you sort of went to and recorded some footage?
Yeah, so I mean, I discovered it in a newspaper article back in 2009, and then I was just kind of tracking it for a little while. It seemed really like this, what's this crazy thing, chessboxing? It's fascinating, whatever. And I was like, okay, this, you know, might be interesting for a documentary. I'd never made documentaries at that point. Like I was always focused on fiction filmmaking, and I had done a narrative short film, and I looked into. I was just following it on the website. There was like the WCBO website, and London Chessboxing was active at the time as well. And the next event that happened from after I had been kind of researching it was that Ipa Rubing, who I'm sure your listeners know as the inventor of chessboxing, was doing his comeback in retirement fight, he called it. So it was like he hadn't fought in, I think, since the first event in 2003. And I think his friends were always pushing him to get back in the ring, and he didn't want to, either because he was afraid he was going to lose, or he was just liked his mantle as the first chessboxing champion, or I don't know what, or if he was just busy kind of, you know, organizing events or getting things together, you know, on the organizational side. But he decided to come back, step back into the ring, and that would be his last fight. And I thought, yeah, that would be a cool way to kind of get into this story and see what people are all about, and discover a bit about what this is. And at that time, I didn't know if it was just like a joke or what, you know. So, but I knew I didn't want to treat it as a joke. Like I knew that if I was going to do this, there were enough news stories that kind of like tacked it on at the end of the news, and were kind of like, oh, now look at this crazy thing, you know. And I knew if I was going to do this, I didn't want it to be that, because I thought that chessboxing sounded like a really genius idea, and I wanted to show that to people. But I didn't know if the people doing it thought it was a joke or not, you know. So I reached out to the WCBO. And this was in November of 2010, or yeah, the event was in November of 2010. And I reached out to Ipa, and he got no response. He didn't answer me. And it was his director of international, I don't know what you call it, director of international
relations or something,
so to speak. Yeah. Daniel Dieterich, who got back to me, and he said, you know, he saw the potential in what I was trying to do. He understood that I wasn't doing like another kind of joke piece, and he said, you know, well, yeah, okay, well, I'll put you in touch with Ipa, and we'll see. We'll be happy to have you. And spoke to Ipa for a little bit, and he invited me out, and so that was the first event that I recorded.
It's interesting you're talking about how chessboxing is represented in the wider world, because it's definitely, I don't know if it's a problem necessarily, but there's definitely like a threshold which I think the sport struggles to overcome, which is we get loads of press, loads and loads of press, but it's always as a novelty item, which isn't, you know, we're lucky to get that interest in what we're doing. But I think you're right. I think to bring the sport over that line is going to be very difficult. I certainly don't think we're there yet. And yeah, I think I speak for everyone in the sport, really. We appreciate what you're doing, because this kind of coverage really helps to build that idea in people's minds that it is something that they can invest their time in and get into as a sport in its own right, and really enjoy everything the sport has to offer, rather than sort of thinking, well, that's novel, and then moving on to something else.
I've noticed over the years that the coverage has gotten a bit, like, at the very beginning there was no serious coverage, you know, and then as over, you know, I said I've been doing this for 11 years, that over that time I've seen more serious kind of treatments come out in the media, like some short documentaries and some articles that actually take it more seriously, which is nice. It was nice to see that was happening. But yeah, as you say, it's still kind of like on that cusp of like not, you know, still a novelty after all this time. But yeah, the film, you know, what's important to know about the film is that it's not strictly about chess boxing. I don't think just chess boxing could sustain a film for an hour and a half or an hour 45 minutes, which is how long this movie is. It's a story. It has to be supported by the people, you know, and so the people I found, Tim Woolgar, who's, you know, everyone knows in the London chessboxing world, obviously, because he's the reason why it exists, is one of the main characters of the film, as is Ipa Rubing, and the whole film is about their investment in this sport. Why are they doing this, you know? And it's just that it could almost be anything. It's just about these two passionate guys who are like really put it all into this for some reason, and their struggle to make it work between each other, and their relationship between the two of them, and their relationships, like their personal relationships and that kind of thing. So it really made for a really amazing story that I was lucky to capture, and that they were, you know, that they were generous enough to give to me.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, you were good enough to allow me to have a preview of the film, and obviously I'm heavily involved in the sport. But I think even if I hadn't known about chess boxing, I think there's enough, or there's a huge amount of humanity in the film, and there's big arcs, particularly the sort of the relationship between Ruben and Woolgar, and actually just picking up on that as well. I think it's interesting, and you might be able to comment, you know, how the two competing visions sort of played out, because I think we talked about taking chessboxing seriously, and I think Tim Woolgar is sort of well, his background is TV production, so I think he kind of had an eye for what people were looking for, and his vision of the sport was quite different to Ruben's. And the impression I got, although I've never went to a show in one of Ipa's shows, is that they took the sport much more seriously in terms of how they presented it in the live show, whereas Tim Woolgar's vision was a bit more entertainment sort of focused. And I wonder, do you think how those two things played out, and do you think sort of one view undermined the other view? You know, the taking it seriously was undermined slightly by how it's presented in London.
One of the super interesting things about the sport is that kind of people come at it with different perspectives and have different ideas of what it should be. And yeah, I think there's value in both of them, you know? Like, I think Ipa's, I love Tim's events. I think they're super fun. The fight quality is at a good standard, you know. It's like, it's not like that there's just these joke fights, you know. It's like, it's very entertaining, and he just knows how to make a fun time within the context of this serious sporting event, you know, or like people who take it seriously coming into the ring and actually competing, but making it an entertaining event and knowing what he has on his hands, you know, and how to make it fun for people who are coming, and who wouldn't necessarily normally come to a boxing event or a chess match, you know, like they wouldn't otherwise, but they're attracted to this, and he makes it a fun night for them, as do you now, you know, from what I see in the live streams and stuff. And in Berlin, it almost came out of, it was interesting. I mean, Ipa's his background is he's a performance artist, and so he had these like really cool art performances that he's done, and he has these like idea of how to bring people together and do these things, very grandiose kind of events. And the first chess boxing event that he did looked like it was super entertaining. You know, it was like this really amazing, vibrant event and really cool. And then I think he started to do, he had these visions to make chess boxing like the next UFC, or the next like this big Vegas style boxing events and that kind of thing. And to do that, for him, in his mind, he had to make it super serious, and which is not wrong in a way, but it's like almost putting the cart before the horse in some ways. And it came, I think it was born a bit out of an insecurity that came from the press coverage that we were talking about, you know, like that there's this, because the coverage was a bit, you know, tongue in cheek, I think he was afraid that it was never going to shake that image. And so he did everything he could. He went like, you know, the extra mile in the opposite direction to kind of temper that idea that, no, this is serious, as serious it could be. We have we have highly rated chess players, and we have the boxers who fought 80 matches at least, and this and that, you know, like, but the thing is that for the sport, and it's not to say that the sport can't get there, but and the events were interesting. They were fun. They were very cool events. They were cool. They were like impressive events, you know, but they weren't as fun as and engaging necessarily as the London events that I've seen or participated in. And so the thing is that it's almost, putting the cart before the horse, in the sense that the sport has to have a sport, it has to grow organically. You have to have people who are interested enough in the sport to do it, and do it enough and practice at it enough that you get the people with those records of 80 fights and high chess ratings through doing the sport. You know, like right now or early on in the sport, you were looking for people who had these two skill sets just on their own, and the pool is so limited of people who have these two skill sets. And so you're trying to find these people and match them up correctly and make it work, make all the bouts work and stuff, and which is very difficult. And to have a high standard, it's hard, you know, because you're creating a new skill that people need to learn in order to be good at. And so I think over time you're getting to the point now where there are people who are more who know about the sport more, and who are coming into it, and with an idea of like the long view of doing it for a longer period of time and training properly and getting those skills. But I think it's still in the growth phase, you know, and I think it has to grow more organically and have more of an amateur organization feel to it in order to build up to the point that Ipa was trying to attain. And I think it might be, the thing about the film, the story of the film and the themes of the film have to do with balance. Like chess boxing, you see these two polar opposites and you're like, how could they work together? And the sport itself is trying to find a balance between these two disciplines, right? And strike that balance in order to succeed at it. The fighters have to strike this balance in order to succeed. And the film, through the characters themselves kind of represent chess and boxing in this way too. You have like Tim, who's this kind of fly by the seat of his pants, passionate guy who just like loves to kind of, it's all heart, you know? And so he's more of like the boxing side of it, and whereas Ipa was very strategic in how he approached everything. He wouldn't put on an event until he had all his financing and all his sponsorship lined up and just this and that. And he was very calculating as to how he was like progressing with this vision. And so he was more of the chess mind of it. And so these two guys clashed and were trying to find a balance between each other to see if they could make it work, to make the sport itself work, which is also trying to find this balance. So the whole film is, all the themes kind of tie into the sport, and I think it works quite well on multiple levels.
Yeah, I want to ask you a few questions about the film before we just do that. I wondered if, because you got involved in the sport in 2009, you were saying, and that was around the time when social media was really sort of taking off. And I wonder how you've seen the sport change, because obviously you were interacting with people across the globe involved in the sport, so you have a pretty good view of what people are doing. And I'm just thinking of, sports like boxing, for example, having a personality and having a social media presence, and that coming across and having big ring intros and all that kind of stuff has really grown in popularity. And I think it's partly because of social media, and people can get closer to these characters. And to be honest, I don't think you have to be the best heavyweight boxer to be the title holder. You need to have that persona that is going to compel people to buy tickets at like £90 for a pay-per-view ticket. And I wonder how that has, in your view, sort of affected things in the way people approach chess boxing.
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever considered it specifically. I know from the perspective of making the film that social media was almost integral, because there were things that, to IPA, for example, I was just like some filmmaker who's going to come film some stuff and then leave and then disappear forever. He didn't realize that I was going to keep coming back over and over again. And there were key events that he didn't tell me about, he didn't think to alert me that, oh, I'm doing this investment, I'm doing this event in front of investors, and that it might be cool for the film. He never did that. I always had to kind of chase after him and find out what was happening. And so one of the fighters who was fighting on that event posted about it on his social media, on his Facebook page. And I'm like, wait a second, that would be really good for the film. And then I contacted IPA. Oh my God, this is happening in 2 weeks. Oh, can I come down and film this kind of thing? So that the film wouldn't have happened if it weren't for things like that and people having that social media presence, So that was helpful to me, and to be able to kind of track and figure out what's happening in the chessboxing world. In terms of the actual fighters themselves and how the sport is perceived, I think you guys do an amazing job through the podcast, and through your mail shots have gotten pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I love I don't know. I don't know if it's when you started writing them, or I don't know are you responsible for writing the podcast?
Yes, I write the newsletters. When I took it over, I just thought, I'm going to have to be doing this. It's work. What I'd like to do is something that I enjoy doing. I really like the Daily Mash, and I don't know, it's kind of similar to the Onion.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read any of those sort of websites. And then I was, I'm trying to write a newsletter, trying to think of something interesting to say, and then you talk to the fighters, and they're like, I'm an accountant and I do this, and so I just thought, I'm just spending loads of time. I'm not getting any content that people are going to want to read. I think I'll just go full satire and just make stuff up and make it as funny as possible. Hopefully people will read it because of that, and I'm able to promote what we're doing.
I have to say, they're awesome. They're highly entertaining. I love getting those mail shots. They've gotten totally off the rails and completely ridiculous, and they're very enjoyable to read.
Well, that's very kind of you, and I'm glad you take it in that way, because I'm often sort of worried that people, particularly the fighters, I have to explain to them before they go out, by the way, this is, and often if it's the first time, I'll send it to them so they can read it beforehand to make sure, they're not going to get upset about anything. But obviously, usually they understand that it's a bit of a joke. But yeah, so you should, if you're listening to this and you're not signed up to the newsletter, you should do that. Even if you're, you've already got tickets to the show, it's definitely worth reading. We do have a lot of exciting news at the moment, which we perhaps get onto at the end of the podcast. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much, David Bitton, for coming on the podcast. We've got the second part of the interview with David coming in a week's time. So this is going out on the 6th of December, this podcast, and we've got David's film coming out on the 7th, on the Tuesday, tomorrow. So there'll be links on our websites, watch our social media channels, go and download the film,
Watch the film. It's a great film. Highly recommend it. If you haven't got tickets already for our show on the 11th of December, it might be sold out, but go and check chessboxingnation.com, see if there's any tickets left. Otherwise, you'll have to catch it on twitch.tv/chessboxingnation. See you in a week's time.